the day, everyone. I'm privileged to welcome you all into the third edition of Orange City Literature Festival, organized by SDR Knowledge Foundation in association with GH Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Group of Institutions. A platform that celebrates wisdom, experiences, narratives, and notions from all walks of life. Having said that, it's thrilling to be here with you all today. I am Aditi Mudra, delighted to be your anchor for today's session, The Shift to Net Zero and Our Future by Mr. Utkarsh Majmudar in conversation with Mr. Kartik Borikar. Mr. Utkarsh Majmudar is a professional with over 2 decades of experience encompassing teaching, research, and administration at premier business schools in India. IIM Bangalore, IIM Lucknow, IIM Udaipur, etc. And working with large corporations in India at GE Capital, iGATE, HSBC, etc. He teaches finance at leading management institutions. He's also a member of board governors at IIM Raipur. Apart from finance, he has done significant work in the area of sustainability, conducting an annual study of the performance of companies on corporate responsibility, working with large companies, publishing cases on sustainability, and writing extensively on the theme. He has also co-authored 2 books. His second book, Shift Decisions for a Net Zero World, has been released recently. It's an honor to have you with us, Mr. Utkarsh Majmudar, sir. And this gets even more delightful as we have Mr. Kartik Borikar, sir, who will be in conversation with him as the moderator. Mr. Kartik is a serial entrepreneur with over 22 years of experience. Though his major work revolves around automation in vehicle cleaning industry, he is very critical about ecology and human impact on it. He, with his team, has developed a lot of equipment with help recycling water for vehicle cleaning industry. He has also been instrumental in developing biodegradable cleaning chemicals for vehicle cleaning. He is also an avid cyclist, and we are told that he even cycles to work with encouraging others to do so. And once again, welcome you both, sir. Also, before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the support of Westland Publications as their association is valuable to OCLF. Now, my dear audience, you are about to experience a conversation between very dynamic individuals. So without skipping a moment, I humbly invite Mr. Kartik Borikar, sir, to lead us ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm indeed very happy to be a part of OCLF 2021. I've been associated since last 3 years. I think the first one also, second and third one as well. So I've seen the numbers growing, and I'm very happy that people like the kind of participation we are getting this time. It really shows that how successful it is becoming these days. So I wish a very successful road ahead for OCLF 22 and even further. Yeah. Coming to Mr. Utkarsh, he has done a lot of work in the environment, and basically he has written books like Decision for Net Zero World and these things. So before coming to the book, we would like to actually listen to him, how he actually got into this, and where does he come from, what actually sparked that thing that I want to do something which is like jagrut karna, what we say, to to make other people more aware about the problems what we'll be having in the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kartik. And firstly, I would like to thank the Orange City Literature Festival for having me on board, as well as Westland Publications, who have published both our books and who are also sponsors for this. So those thanks are essential. Moving on to Kartik's questions, I have been a finance person all my life. I mean, for most of my life, right? So let me start a little bit. Life history is too long, but I'll take you through at least some part of it. So I started by doing my MBA from IIM Lucknow, and then spent a couple of years in the industry before going on to do my fellow program at IIM Ahmedabad, uh, and then taught for a number of years at various institutions. And then the corporate life attracted me, so I moved into the corporate life. Spent number of years with companies which have already been listed out. Uh, so interesting journey. That's in the sense that I did quite a bit of academics, and then went into the the practical nitty-gritty of working with companies, and basically been on the finance side most of my life. Uh, in 2011 and somewhere, I decided to go independent, and so started looking at opportunities in training and teaching and things like that. That's when I somehow one day I had a conversation with my friend with whom I was together in my. She was doing her MBA. I was doing my PhD program. Namrata Rana, and both of us sort of had a telephonic conversation, and we got into talking about sustainability. And she had done some work in sustainability. She had done some courses on sustainability as well, and she was trying to get into the field. And I said, let's do something together. Right. So that's where I think the whole thing started. Just over a telephonic conversation, nothing very exciting as it may seem. And we said, look, so that's where the whole thing started. And one of the interesting things that we were sort of trying to look at, and that's where Aditi was mentioning about the annual study that we do on companies' sustainability and CSR activities. That's where it all started. Uh, we said, look, most people are measuring company sustainability and CSR actions by how much they spend, right? So somebody spends 5 crores, somebody else spends 10 crores. The guy who spends 10 crore is better than 5 crores. So that can't be true, right? How efficient is your uh, performance? And that's where the whole thing started. So we started the study. We started writing a blog on the Economic Times. Wrote a large number of pieces out there, uh, right? So so we started getting an understanding. We also started writing cases on companies, and by now we've written about a dozen cases uh, of several large companies, uh, Finolex, Ambuja Cement, Dalmia Bharat, Nestle, Hero Motocorp, Toyota Kirloskar, Holding. So we had a fairly good understanding of what's happening on the ground. We were also evaluating companies, and that led to our first book, which was called A Balance, Responsible Business for the Digital Age. And this book actually came about because we also saw that the fourth industrial revolution was coming into play. Right? Things were going digital. Right? So, for example, if you look at banks today are very different from banks that we knew. Right? Do you and I ever visit a branch? Maybe once in 3 months or once in 6 months. It's all data, right? So it's everything is becoming digital. So that led to this book, right? Published in 2018. We continued our work, uh, and then came the book that we are going to talk about today. This is called Shift: Decisions for a Net Zero World. And in some sense, this book uh, sort of foresaw the drama that was to unfold in the last 1 month, and that was the Glasgow summit, right, which put the net zero right in the limelight. Right? So, uh, so that's what the journey has been, and this book is, I think, a very interesting book because it covers a whole range of things, and we'll talk about more things in the book as we go along.
Interesting.
Got it. I
Actually,
hope I've not been too long.
finance and environment, they are always in a tussle, because the environment, generally, like the environmental agencies and those things, they always try to impose something on the companies which is not liked by the finance people, and you happen to be both of them. So anyways, before we move on to the book, can you just give an idea, because most of the people have heard it so many times, net zero, and because of the COP 26, people have heard about this net zero, but I am not sure how many people actually understand what net zero is. Can you just
Okay.
little bit elaborate, and then we'll go on to the book?
Sure. Uh, so I think before I go on to what net zero is, I'll try and respond to the comment that you made about finance and environment. Right? It's a very interesting thing. Uh, in some sense, finance and environment are intrinsically linked, if you look at it. So once I got into, I thought this was a completely different area that I was getting into. But if you look at it, there are a couple of things that happen. One, the effect of environment has to be measured, right? It has to be measured and translated into monetary terms. And that's what links it very closely to finance. At another level, the linkage with finance is interesting because uh, if you have to be environmentally sustainable, you have to undertake actions, right? And each action is like a project that you invest in, because there's money to be spent and the benefits that accrue, right? So in that sense, the measurement of the benefits and the costs that are involved are essentially finance. And ultimately, the decision sort of rests with the CFO whether to undertake a financial, an environmentally sustainable decision or not, right? So in that sense, finance and environment are actually very closely linked, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to net zero. Uh, so this is something which has been incoming for a long period of time. Uh, what has been happening is, let's go back a little bit about into history, how we were. If you go back, say 300, 400 years back, uh, we were primarily agrarian. Right? We produced what we needed, we consumed it, and we were happy people. Right? What has changed significantly over time is that the industrial revolution took place. An industrial revolution led to manufacturing, automation, a whole host of things, right? Which brought a lot of goods and services, mainly goods at that time, into our homes. Right? But manufacture of those goods led to a lot of pollution and things like that, which we didn't really care about. Right? It was small. It didn't hurt too many people. Right? But then it all exploded. So if you see the last, say, 100 years, last 100 years has been an explosion in manufacturing across the globe, right? Earlier, the development, so you saw US, UK, but now you would see Asia, India, China, so everywhere, Africa, right? So that led to a large amount of pollution taking place. Right? Now, what happens is when you pollute, there are a lot of what are known as greenhouse gases that get emitted. Right? Mostly what we talk about is carbon dioxide, which is CO2, but there is also methane, there is nitrous oxide, that there are a whole host of gases. So although we generally talk about carbon, these are essentially all greenhouse gases. Right? And because we can't say so much of methane, so much of carbon dioxide, so and so, we all together call it CO2, it's actually technically called CO2 equivalent, right? Because everything is made equivalent to CO2. So there are all these emissions. Now, what do these emissions do? These emissions get trapped in the atmosphere, and because of these emissions getting trapped in the atmosphere, the Earth starts heating up, and that's what people talk about global warming, right? The term global warming has also undergone a change, because earlier people used to call global warming, then it started being called climate change. Now it's called climate risk, and more on that later on, right? So what has come about, and there have been whole range of efforts, starting from the Rio meetings, then the Kyoto Protocol, till Paris Agreement, where we came to a real agreement that the Earth needs to be saved. Right? That the Earth is heating at an unprecedented rate, and it needs to be saved. So in order to do that, what was required was to reduce these emission of greenhouse gases. Right? Now, net zero is simply saying that whatever we emit, we have to either reduce it, or we have to find ways in which these can be offset, which are known as carbon offsets. It means you plant more trees which absorb carbon, so you reduce carbon in the atmosphere. Right? The term net zero essentially means that the emissions minus the reductions minus the offsets should be zero, which means essentially no new CO2 or no new greenhouse gases should be left in the atmosphere. Incrementally, you should be zero. And that's where the Paris Agreement really pointed it out to be. And the Glasgow Summit, which was COP26, is what really has been the focus point recently.
Okay.
Kartik, sir.
Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes. I think I'm right, Aditi?
Yeah.
Anyways, so I was thinking about this. Like now, the world has to progress. That's how the mankind has to be, and energy requirements would go up drastically. Like as more and more people come to the cities, and that kind of urbanization kind of happens. So how do you see the future actually? Like what do you think is the future of net zero, and how the countries should actually try to achieve it? Or because I am quite perplexed in the way that US and China are much more bigger polluters than us. Still, like it is shown that the third world countries and the second world countries are the people who are polluting more. So it's like a blame game kind of situation which is going on.
That's a very interesting thought, and that's what really played out in the Glasgow summit, right? So one of the major debates that has been taking place is between what they call the North and the South, the developed countries versus the developing countries, and the whole argument has been that the developed countries should pay for uh, the changes that the developing countries have to bring about. And primarily, the story has been, look, you guys developed in a way in which was completely unsustainable, and now that the crux has come, you're burdening us with that expenditure. So that's a very interesting thing that happened at Glasgow, and the whole debate. Uh, the, the Prime Minister went there and put out this Panchamrit, 5 things that need to be done. And the primary one in which it was said was that, look, we need to become net zero by 2070. Right? And India, in that sense, if you look at it comparatively, is the is going to become net zero at a fairly late this thing. Other countries have committed to 2050 and 2060, and we've committed far longer. Right? Uh, so if we need to do this, and That's what the future is going to be, right? One, I would say the companies have to make a commitment towards net zero, right? Large chunk of emissions come from large corporations, and many large corporations in any case are making efforts to do this, right? uh, I was looking at sustainability reports of top 100 companies, and already maybe about 10, 12 companies have already set out their net zero targets, right? So which is a very heartening thing, right? And all we are saying in this book is that businesses need to shift their operations in such a way that they become net zero, right? Uh, so that's one thing. So not only do the companies need to become net zero, uh, the companies also need to make their supply chains net zero, right? So essentially what happens is that you may be net zero, but your suppliers, your logistics, the way you reach to the customers is not net zero, right? Now, these are typically medium scale, small scale operators. They need support, right? So essentially what you need to do is to support these guys to help them become more sustainable. Uh, so that's one thing. The other thing is companies need to build what we call the brand purpose, right? Branding is something which is intrinsic to all businesses, right? What is the purpose behind our brand, right? Now, what is also happening, and if you've been following it, and which we also talked about in our book, is that there is a change that is taking place. Consumers have started demanding more sustainable products, right? Uh, Investors have started demanding that companies become more sustainable, right? The regulators are demanding sustainability. Judges have, in some recent decisions, Royal Dutch Shell, etc., said, look, you need to be more sustainable. So that whole range of things. So if a company becomes more sustainable, it can promote its brand and become more sustainable. So net zero essentially gets linked to your brand purpose, right? Uh, the other thing that becomes essential are what again, these are all there in the book, is building what we call strategic partnerships. You can't do everything on your own. You need support, right? So you may need technology support, you may need financial support, uh, right? If industries have to take action, they can't do, each company can't do it alone. It needs to collaborate with other companies in the industry, right? So that becomes extremely important from the perspective of companies. So strategic partnerships, to our mind, is something that becomes essential in the long term, right? Uh, what is also important for companies is to think about energy transitions, right? How do we transit from the kind of energy that we are using to green energy, solar, wind, whatever you may want to use it? Because a large chunk of fossil fuel consumption is really coming from the energy sector. And in order to avoid that, we have to take care of that. So that energy transition is something that companies can really bring about, and a lot of companies are essentially now starting to set up their solar farms and wind farms and use that energy. And technology is also improving because now you have storage, the cheaper cost, and things like that. Uh, and lastly, but not the least, is to look at how do I design my businesses uh, in way in which they intrinsically think about net zero and sustainability, right? So you have to have, so people are talking about this, the systems thinking, right? So how do you use systems thinking in order to become more sustainable uh, and become net zero? I think these are some of the things that we need to look at it. Some other things would, of course, be in terms of the financial markets. And being a finance person, let me maybe spend a minute on it. Is to think about the financial systems. How does the financial system support all this large sums of money? I mean, large or small, huge sums of money are really required in order to bring about this transition. Where does this come from? It has to come from the financial system, and the financial system has to start thinking about how it evaluates investments, right? So should I invest in oil and gas, or should I invest in solar, right? Uh, so, so those kind of decisions are now being put and closely looked at on the financial system side. I think that financial system is fairly important, right? We need to focus on key areas like waste, water, energy, uh, right? And of course, the one element which people don't talk about is food, right? Agriculture, in some sense, is also a large emitter of greenhouse gases. People don't think of it that way, right? Think of paddy. Paddy gives out large amount of, so the way it is cultivated right now with lots of water and things like that, right? So our food systems also need to undergo change. So whole range of things that need to be done.
In fact, what you mentioned about the customers actually incentivizing the businesses who are more sustainable, we manufacture these automatic car wash machines. So the customers who have started using biodegradable chemicals and water recycling systems, they are educating their customers that we are doing these things to conserve nature, and people are willing to pay a little bit higher uh, to get the services. So they have seen those things. Uh, Coming back to your book, can you just, like, we have few minutes left. Can you tell us, like, for whom the book is? Like, definitely the business owners I can see, and I can actually like, from the kind of themes you have mentioned, I can definitely sense that all the business owners should actually read this book. Other than the business owners, do you feel who should actually read your book?
Actually, to my mind, everyone should read this book. And I'm not saying just because I want to sell my book. The reason why I say that everyone should read this book is simply because this is what our world is going to be tomorrow, right? Uh, Without net zero, without these transitions happening, right? Takes one instance, and because of these transitions, the nature of jobs themselves are changing. Right?
Mhm.
And all of us, you're an entrepreneur, but a lot of us are in jobs, and a lot of jobs will become redundant, right? And that shift is also happening, right? So how do I even start thinking about uh, what is going to happen in the future, right? So reading the book in some sense helps us uh, take a call on what areas, and we talk about green jobs. That's one chapter in the book, right? So we talk about green chapters. So maybe I'll just quickly run you through the things that we talk about, right? We talk about the net zero transition, how ESG transforms businesses, circularity, right? Circularity has become big, right? And it impacts businesses. And there are a lot of opportunities in terms of circularity, uh, in terms of even for an individual like housewife who wants to think about how she wants to recycle her waste, the thinking about it becomes important, right? Addressing food, water, and energy, some of the things that I mentioned just now, leave no one behind, right? This is about equity and things like that. Extremely important, right? Uh, Green jobs in green economy, brands that we trust, transformation at scale. How these transformations are happening at scale. So anybody who's interested in business, who's interested in their work life, needs to understand how businesses are transforming. What will be the impact on them? So my sense is that a lot of this has to do with the kind of impacts that new world is bringing about. And to my mind, that there is this shift. The title we have given is because the entire planet is going to shift to a new way of working and a new way of looking at things, right? And hence, to my mind, this is a book for everyone, not just for the businessmen. uh, it's for everyone to think and understand about what uh, what sustainability is.
Yeah, actually, it'll happen like you can do it willingly, or that'll be a forceful shift for you. Like that's how I think about it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
like if we might have actually sparked curiosity in the people who are viewing this, can you suggest some more books around the topic and how people can actually know more about this thing?
So there are lots of interesting books around this. One book that I would recommend is by John Elkington, called Green Swans, right? Which is very interesting because Nassim Nicholas Taleb talked about black swans, once in a lifetime events, right? And COVID was seen to be a black swan event. And John Elkington has smartly turned it around and saying, look, and which is actually happening. COVID has been a watershed uh, uh, point for sustainability. Right? The revival of the economies is now going to be driven uh, by sustainable businesses, right? Uh, and there's that large, and EU, for example, has a large program for what they call the green revival.
Okay.
And John Elkington really says that, look, it's not a black swan, it's a green swan, because this swan is going to make the world greener. And it's a very interesting book if people are interested in.
Very
I
interesting.
can talk about lots more, but yeah, in the amount of time we have. But if
Aditi,
people are
do we have
interested
any
in,
questions from the
yeah.
audience?
Yes, sir, we can sure have.
Uh,
If anyone has.
In fact, till the time you are actually looking for the questions, yesterday itself on BBC they were showing there were few villages in near Valsad in Gujarat. There are few villages in Andhra Pradesh. The seashore has moved almost like 30, 40 more meters inside, and it has completely washed away the village itself. And from there, I was like kind of alarmed that people have to wake up now. So, and incidentally, we have this talk today. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, there's a great worry that some of the island countries will actually get wiped out.
Yeah. So, so I think there is some delay in actually it gets recorded and it gets transmitted over there. So there's some. So we can talk about other things. Uh, So, what are the key takeaways and for the from the Glasgow summit what we had recently? So, can you share some light on that?
I think one of the things that Glasgow Summit has really put is that we have to worry about climate change far more than what we have. Right? Uh, so there are two things that I would say. The IPCC report that came out just before the Glasgow Summit, which was meant to be used by the Glasgow Summit, it painted a very grim picture. It said, look, the way we are going, uh, that the Paris Agreement targets simply can't be reached. Right? And Glasgow Summit really pushed that hard. Right? And that's what led to several bickerings that happened. So I think one of the key takeaways has been we have to advance everything that we are doing, and we have to do more. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from the Glasgow summit. Yeah, and the fact that there has to be a linkage between what the developed countries and developed countries have to do. I think, and countries really have to commit hard on their reductions.
There is one question though. The question actually reads this: what can a common person do to actually achieve net zero? So I think that
A
comes
common
from not the companies, but common man. What is his responsibility to actually achieve net zero? That kind of thing.
right. Um, okay, so let's put. So you will. I don't know if you have seen, but there are people who live in houses which are completely self-sustaining. Right. The moment you draw electricity, and I'm taking a simple example, the electricity that we use to run all our appliances, etc. Where do they come from? They come from the electricity, right? Most of it is coal-fired electricity that we are using, right? Uh, you shift to solar energy, rooftop solar. That's
Yeah.
one simple way uh, of helping net zero, right? Try and reduce your car usage, for example, right? If you're alone and you're driving to office, take 4 people with you, right?
Yeah.
So
Or
rather
ride
than
a
there being
bike.
4 cars on the road, there'll be just 1 car on the road.
Yeah.
So simply use public transport,
Yeah.
right? So if you look at it from a common man's perspective, there's a lot that a common man can also do. It's not something that only businesses can do.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot that individuals can also do. Right? Think of
Correct.
your waste. If you want to reduce all this, cut down on your use of plastic. Why
Yeah.
do you need to carry stuff in plastic bags? And it's a simple solution.
Right. Right.
Right? A water usage, your car wash systems use less water, for instance, right?
Yeah.
And instead of washing your car every day, wash your car 3 days a week. It should make a difference.
True.
Or use Kartik systems.
All right. So I think Aditi, we can conclude.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was indeed it was indeed a pleasure talking to you, and I'm glad I was associated with OCLF for this session, and I look forward to the future association as well. Utkarsh?
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure interacting with you. And it's a very interesting topic, and maybe we could have gone on for another half an hour or so. But and once again, thanks to Orange City Literature Festival and Westland Publications for this opportunity.
At the outset, I would like to thank Utkarsh Majmudar sir and Kartik Borikar sir for joining us today. We wish we get to hear you both again and be equally enlightened as we all are today. And for my dear massive audience, I'm sure that after witnessing this conversation, you all are taking home an enriched version of yourself, just as I will. So thank you for joining us today. Until I see you again, this is Aditi Pudra signing off.
Welcome to Raisoni Group, a vision beyond.